right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Neander, back for another great episode with you today. Thanks for joining us. So, we're right in the middle of our NFC divisional previews for the upcoming 2020 season. We've already done the NFC North, the NFC West. Today, we're going to be moving on to the NFC South. There's no shortage of storylines in the NFC South this year. Obviously, Tom Brady leaving New England, going to Tampa Bay, probably the biggest storyline of the offseason. So we have all of that going on. We have Atlanta. Can they make, another run with this squad with Julio and Matt Ryan? We have New Orleans. Is this, Drew Brees' last dance? Is this his last chance to get that second Super Bowl ring and kind of cap off this Hall of Fame legacy of his? Carolina's in rebuild mode. They grabbed Teddy Bridgewater from the aforementioned Saints. And we don't know how that's going to work out. They've got new coaches, got a new quarterback. We know McCaffrey's going to touch the ball a whole bunch. But will he fall backwards towards, the rest of the pack there? Stay tuned to find out. We've got one of our good friends of the show joining us to help us out today, my friend Mike McNaughton. And we're going to jump right into it. Let's get ready to roll with the NFC South. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. Mike McNaughton. Hey, Mike. Thanks for coming back on. How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, you all might remember Mike. He helped us out last week with our AFC previews. He was on doing the AFC North with us, and he drew another exciting division here in the NFC South. Lots of storylines here, lots of offseason moves, and lots of fantasy football relevant drama, as you might say. So we're going to jump right in, man. You ready to rock?
I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
All right, so the NFC South was won last year, shockingly, by the New Orleans Saints. They pulled off a few of those lately. And they're getting near the end of this era here where they kind of got to put it together. More than likely, it's Brees' last year. They didn't make too many moves in the offseason to improve the team. They did go out and grab Emmanuel Sanders, kind of a under-the-radar move. There weren't that many great wide receivers available in free agency this year. That was one of the better ones, and they went ahead and grabbed him. Of course, they let Teddy Bridgewater go in the offseason, as well as, I guess, their de facto number 2 wide receiver, Ted Ginn, for what that was worth. We assume Sanders will slot right into that. So let's get started at the top here with Mr. Drew Brees. Missed a few games last year, played about 11 games or so, the better part of it, and played pretty well for the most part when he was in. No reason to think that he's fallen off a lot, came back from his injury and looked, just fine to me. So Drew Brees, as he has been the last few years, will probably be a relative draft value for fantasy football players going in, the later half of the round. You're not going to have to pay up for him like you do for Deshaun Watson or, Kyler Murray this year or someone like that. So, the bigger question is, if you're a guy that likes to draft near the end of the draft for your quarterback, how happy are you with Drew Brees as your quarterback this year?
Yeah, the value at the end of the draft is there. I'm happy if I'm getting him later in the draft, like you say, I'm happy. But if there's a run on quarterbacks and you maybe panic or something and you're getting him a little bit in those, middle rounds, I think you're going to be a little bit displeased with the value that you get back on that pick. There's a lot of things to consider with Drew Brees. We've definitely seen some of the arm strength start to decline. Obviously he's got a huge rapport with Michael Thomas. You have to wonder how long that's going to last until, teams start to try to, take him away as much as possible and then force him to maybe try to push the ball downfield to some other options. So later in the draft, yeah, I'm happy. It's fine that way. If it's like I said, middle rounds or you panic and make a pick, you might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, and I think, I'm hoping that the preseason ADP drops a little bit. Right now, he's the QB 8 off the board, which is just a little rich for my blood, being that's in the, 7th, 8th round. That's right at that time where I'm thinking about quarterback, and I'm saying, all right, if one of those guys that I really like, to make a big jump this year, like Kyler Murray this year, he was, in the 8th, which he's not going to be, but, that's the kind of guy this year I'll jump on. But I'm definitely worried about Brees. I'm just hoping that, He just seems to be one of those guys where the momentum doesn't roll in his favor in the preseason. His ADP tends to fall a little bit. And if he goes towards QB 11, 12, it could be a different story. But right now at QB 8, I think it's just a little rich for my blood with what they want to do. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit better this year.
I agree.
So let's go to those running backs then. Alvin Kamara still being drafted in the top 4 or 5 for a lot of people, especially at the running back position. Was number 12 last year. Had a disappointing year, mostly because of the touchdown totals, right? A huge drop off from the last couple of years in his touchdown totals, and that's probably the biggest area for improvement here. There was a little bit more of an even split for the carries, especially between Murray and Kamara, last year, Latavius Murray. So do you think that Alvin Kamara should be drafted as a top 3 or 4 running back this year?
Yeah, I think he could have a really nice season. I'm perfectly fine taking him anywhere from 4, 5, 6 in the running back group. And again, I think that it comes down to, Drew Brees may be having an issue pushing the ball to Michael Thomas. He's going to get more touches as a result, even if it's not on the ground, because Latavius Murray takes away some of those, carries on the ground. But then Alvin Kamara gets the balls coming out of the backfield, and I think he could have a pretty big season. So I like Alvin Kamara in that 4, 5, 6 range, running back wise.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine him not finishing there. If he plays all 16 games. I guess my issue was the ceiling, and that's basically just because of the usage. The other guys that are there, what's Cook, Elliott, Barkley, and McCaffrey are a much higher percentage of the carries and the snaps in their offense. And that's the only thing that worries me. He's just so good that he's going to do, a great job with what he gets, right? We know that. I'll be shocked if the touchdowns don't go up. But, I think, yes, a top 3 running back for me, no. But it's all just so minute, in that area. The bigger question is, do you think wide receiver, right? If you're in the first round, now you're at number 4 or 5. And on the same team, right? We were seeing Michael Thomas and Kamara both being drafted pretty regularly in that top 5 kind of range. So it's an interesting dynamic there to have both guys from the same team. Let's talk about Murray because, he's one of the few handcuffs that's not only extraordinarily valued because if Kamara goes down, obviously you have one of the most valuable running backs there is. But he also has standalone value, not necessarily as a starter every week, but a guy that could be in the flex or if you have a bye week where you have multiple guys on the bye, where you need that fill-in, Murray's getting those 10, 12 plus touches a game. So if you're that guy that drafts Alvin Kamara in the first round, do you think you have to have Latavius Murray or, you don't have to? It's not that important.
Yeah, I think you do. I think you do. You talked about the usage there for a minute too. And I'm also a proponent of doing this with your number 1 running back. So as a fantasy player, you take your number 1 running back. I'm immediately looking to who is behind him in the depth chart to see when I might be able to get that player, just as not only an insurance package, but you never know when you might be in a position, have a great matchup, and say, guess what? I can play both these guys this week, and come away with a boatload of points out of one backfield. So there's a lot of things to consider, but to answer your question, yes, you have to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think he's maybe the most valuable one outside of Tony Pollard, honestly. And I think because you have to match the talent there also, right? So for me, the first 2 guys, McCaffrey,
Sure.
I don't know that I have to draft Reggie Bonifant right now. You know what I mean? If I have Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
Because we don't know that he's going to come in and get 90% of the snaps if McCaffrey gets hurt. I think Barkley's in a similar situation. We saw last year he went down, and who was it? Jonathan Hillman was hot for a couple of weeks. People, everyone wanted to get him. Then it was Wayne Gallman. But
Sure.
they didn't do what Saquon can do, even with near that workload. But for me, Murray is that guy along with Tony Pollard that if you have those 2 guys, Dalvin Cook and you have Kamara, you've got to figure out a way to get these guys, even if it costs you a 7th round pick. You got to do what you got to do. I think you got to get those guys. So
right.
That's it for the backfield. I think they're going to be a more productive backfield this year than they were last year overall.
Yeah. I can agree with that. And again, I mean, you've got 2 really good backs. And I have a feeling, like I said, I mean, the Michael Thomas train cannot continue to go at the insane clip that it's at, right? So then you start to look at other areas where you can get those points, and it's got to be out of the backfield.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because tight end was already a productive position for them last year, so you got to figure. And I'm thinking we're going to move to wide receivers here, and I'm thinking that Sanders will have a good part of that. So you mentioned that Ted Ginn is gone this year, and even as the number two, only had 56 targets, and that has to be among the league, least for number two targets on a team for wide receivers. There can't be that many guys that have had, any teams that had a number two receiver with less targets than that. Traquan Smith, people kept waiting, to see if he could step up. He only had 25 targets on the year. So Emmanuel Sanders, who they brought in, had more targets than both of them combined. So the big question becomes Michael Thomas with another astronomical 185 targets this year and also an absurd catch rate, 149 receptions. How much of that will Emmanuel Sanders eat into, knowing that he probably is a more viable target candidate than either Ted Ginn or Traquan Smith were? Not to say that Thomas is going to be in any means not a great wide receiver, but he's the consensus number one by far right now. And I see that as a question mark. What do you think?
Yeah, he's going to eat into it significantly. I mean, you're talking about a guy that, you don't have to rewind too far to, look at him as one of those quasi, sort of middle 1-2 receivers. I mean, he was at the bottom end of a number one receiver. He, was almost a number two, but kind of fell in that range, So, I mean, look, he's a good receiver. He's a veteran. He's been around for a while. I think he'll fit in really well, and he's got good hands. So it's going to eat into those targets. And, you could see two receivers having over 100 targets, or you could see one guy having over 100 targets into the 118, 120 range, and the other guy having 90 to 95,
And my problem with drafting Michael Thomas in the number 3 to 5 spot this year is that you pretty much have to get this season out of him, I think, to make it worth that. If you don't get this season, if you don't get close to, 140, 1,600 yards and 8 touchdowns, which he had more than all of that last year, but even if you got that, which is an extraordinary season, it might not be worth, missing out on a top 4 running back if that's what happens.
Sure.
I see Michael Thomas as more of a 150 target candidate this year, which is 35 less targets and probably closer to 120 receptions, which, tell me anybody's going to have 120 receptions for 1,300 plus yards and 8 touchdowns. And I'm thrilled with that as, an NFL fan and a fantasy football player. If your expectation is another 1,700 yards and 9 touchdowns, I think you're going to be disappointed.
Agreed. And it just comes down to the simple fact of follow-up seasons to historic statistical seasons typically never live up to that level again. They normally, you don't have a historic statistical season and then the next year they come back and outdo it, right? I mean, take a look at, some of these guys that have had huge seasons and they come back. I can't remember who it was, but, somebody ran for close to 2,000 yards or, either over or just under and came back and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to run for 2,500 next year. Never happens. So again, it's hard to duplicate that. So you have to, have with a lot of certainty, feel like those numbers are coming back. They're going to come back down and be a little bit more in everybody else's stratosphere. But 120 is still pretty studly numbers.
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy year last year because, the number one running back and the number one receiver were so far head and shoulders above, the number 2 with scoring, for fantasy. So
right.
Was it there? And he very well might be the number 1 wide receiver again this year. I just don't think he's going to approach these numbers. So the converse side of that is Emmanuel Sanders, the number 33 wide receiver last year. So without projecting too heavily into that, is he a wide receiver 2, 3, or beyond that this year?
I think he could be a wide receiver 2. I mean, and it's probably toward the back end of that grouping, but I think that this is going to be the best, second or number 2 receiver that Drew Brees has had in that offense for a little while. Like I said, he's a professional. He's been around a while. He's got good hands. He should find his way into that room and into that offense pretty quickly and pretty easily. And he's a pretty decent possession target. So as a possession target, you have to feel like he's going to get, eat into some of those targets as well. So I could see him having a nice season. Yeah, back end of wide receiver 2 to me.
All right, I think he's a little more of a back end wide receiver 3. At the end of the day, I think he'll have some good games this year. I think he'll disappear for some games also. Some of that will depend on the tight end usage and running back usage as well. I do think there's only going to be so many of those, short across the middle passes to go around. Although I think Sanders is going to be great for the team overall. I don't know that he's going to have too much value week to week, but he'll absolutely be one of those guys that every Tuesday is going to be brought up as one of those guys to pick up, or one of those guys because he may or may not be drafted, but he has a couple of bad weeks. He'll float around on the free agent pool. We'll see. But I am happy for Drew Brees. I think this makes Drew Brees a more viable candidate as a quarterback for me, having another weapon like Emmanuel Sanders. Let's move out to tight end here. Jared Cook was the number 7 tight end, had another great season. 43 receptions, 700 yards, big touchdown number, 9 touchdowns. And a lot of it was the back half of the season. In fact, he was the number 1 tight end from week 10 through 17. So is that, hype, or is that, a little more reality? Is Jared Cook a stud tight end? Is he a top tier, tight end 1 possibly, or just another guy that fills in that back end tight end 1 room that seems to have 10 other guys in it?
Well, I think he's a reliable target, like another guy. I mean, veteran guy. He's been around for a while. Seems to be able to find his way open. And he's in a passing first offense, which I think helps him to get more opportunity. So I think he's one of those guys that you can take after that first crop of tight ends in maybe the next grouping and feel really, really comfortable and solid with that pick. Not too many tight ends out there have Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks throwing him the football. So I like him maybe in that, tight end 7, 8, 9 range. And I like that value there. And you might be pleasantly surprised with him. It would not be crazy to think that number, that touchdown number, could even be the same or go up a little bit if they have a lot of shortened red zone opportunities for him.
Yeah, I completely agree that the touchdown number can go up. I mean, they played a number of games without Drew Brees, and most of his best games in the season were when Drew Brees was in the lineup. So that number could definitely go up. And just very quickly here, without going into their, kind of stats or anything, let's talk about the guys that are right ahead of Jared Cook, because right now he's the kind of consensus number 10 on Fantasy Pros, through all their experts, and the number 10 tight end. Just ahead of him, would you rather have Jared Cook or Austin Hooper this year?
I would rather have Jared Cook.
How about Jared Cook or Tyler Higbee?
I'd rather have Jared Cook.
And how about Jared Cook or Evan Ingram?
Just by the sheer Drew Brees factor, I'll go with Jared Cook. I think Evan Ingram is a stud, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and Drew Brees is not walking through that door in the Meadowlands.
Yeah, I think the only one on that list I might take over him would be Higbee. I just think that the back half of the season would just, LA had to make some changes. There's reasons to think that the Higbee explosion, not to the level that it exploded for those last 5 weeks, but that it could be trending that way with just the way their offense is looking. Getting rid of Cooks, I just see them going to a little more small ball, and I love that for Higbee. But yeah, I like Jared Cook this year. It's a very solid tight end. I don't think I want to play the game this year, boom or bust tight end so much. I've been doing it for the last couple of years and streaming a lot, and I think I'm ready for a guy that's going to have 3 to 4 catches basically every game, maybe a couple of more sometimes, and have a high percentage chance of getting into the end zone.
And you may not have to, and I'll bring this up as a reason why, from a football perspective, with what we watch every Sunday outside of the fantasy realm, I think coaches are wising up a little bit to hiding their deficiencies a little bit better, right? So they're not going out and they're not drafting a young quarterback or getting a quarterback that they have questions about and then chucking them to the wolves. They're getting a run game. They're playing a little bit of defense. They're handing the ball off. They're giving them easy, comfortable throws to make, as opposed to throwing him to the wolves like he's Pat Mahomes. You can't do that with every guy. And that makes the tight end position and the running back position that much more valuable. So we may not have to do that. We may see about 2-3 weeks into the season that we've got a lot more offensive coordinators, a lot more coaches out there who are utilizing their tight ends a lot more. And we may see some of these guys start to put up fantasy numbers we can live with and start to push that idea of boom or bust out a little bit more.
Absolutely, man. All right, that's going to do it for the Saints here. We're going to keep moving along in the South. That brings us to our, I don't want to say hometown, but maybe where we're living at, Atlanta
Right.
Falcons, you know. And I've been here almost 20 years, and I like the hometown to win. I don't have another dog in the race in the NFC South per se, so I'm all good if Atlanta wins. And for fantasy, they've been a gold mine, right? You draft Falcons most years, and you get a lot of points out of this offense, no matter how much heartbreak you get if you are a Falcons fan throughout the season. Some new faces here as well. Gone are Devontae Freeman and Kenjon Barner in the backfield. To a lesser extent, Justin Hardy, wide receiver. And then, of course, Austin Hooper, who had the big bust out last year, got very, very well paid for it in Cleveland. And Atlanta just didn't have the money to pay Hooper, and didn't make sense to keep Freeman. So I get those things. And, for a team that had very little money going into the offseason, to replace Devontae Freeman and Austin Hooper with Todd Gurley and Hayden Hurst, to me, is a huge win. A win with a lot of risk and a lot of question marks, but the potential could be as good of a duo, if not better overall, for, less money, and you had none to begin with. But we'll get to those guys and how they're going to affect the team here. But let's start at the top with Matt Ryan. Another very good season, statistically, 66% completion, almost 4,500 yards. The thing was the touchdowns were just a little lower than they had been, 26 through the air. So assuming he plays as well as he has, there's no reason to think he won't. Will the touchdowns get back to that number where he's an elite quarterback? The low 30s to mid 30s, can he get back there this year?
No, I don't think so. I think he'll be right up in that 27 to 30 range. I think that, unfortunately, at this point in his career and with the setup that this team has right now, that this is who he is. Mid to high 20s, maybe low 30s if everything clicks and they stay healthy and the offensive line's able to protect him really well. But I think that between 27 and 30, I think is where he's at.
All right. I think that's a number for him as well. I mean, he played better, near the back half of the season, but they really didn't make, any improvements per se. Like I said, the best case scenario is that these guys are hopefully equal, maybe in production to what, Freeman and Hooper were last year. I think it weighted more towards the running back. Best case scenario, you get a little more out of Gurley. I doubt you get what you got out of Hooper from Hurst this year. But I don't see Matt Ryan being able to crack that top, tier or two, this season. And I don't see him doing it really probably ever again, quite honestly, being ever in that top 6, 7, finish.
Yeah. And another thing to take into account here, I mean, this team has struggled to get to the quarterback. Their defense struggles to get off the field. I know they went out and got Dante Fowler. They have 2 safeties that are going to, you have a safety that's coming back off of 2 straight seasons of bad injuries, and Keanu Neal. Tack McKinley has not lived up to the billing, has not been able to. So what I'm saying is, with all of this stuff going on, I don't think that offense is going to be getting very many short fields. And if they struggle to get off the field, it puts more pressure on the offense to score quicker. So I think those numbers are going to be pretty close to where they were last season. I don't see him taking a significant jump up, but I don't see him taking a significant jump back either.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the backfield. As I mentioned, big name, obviously, Todd Gurley coming in just a couple of years ago, considered one of the top offensive players in the league, had one of the better seasons for a running back, in the last handful of seasons. And actually had a sneaky season last year, seemed to be not really getting off or having these big games, but the number 14 running back over 15 games, and had a solid season, got in the end zone quite a lot, 14 combined touchdowns, and seems to be ranked right now, right in between where he finished last year and where Devontae Freeman finished last year. So Freeman was the number 21 running back, and right now Gurley's kind of the consensus number 16 as far as composite rankings go on Fantasy Pros. So Devontae Freeman had 184 carries last year and 70 targets. And my argument is that if you give, Todd Gurley the exact same amount of carries and receptions, that he'll finish right around that end of the running back one, kind of rate. A lot of that is dependent on health, obviously. But if you had to guess this year, playing Nostradamus at the end of the year, is he healthy? Does he carry a full load? Is he worth drafting as an RB2 for your offense?
Well, if I had to guess if he's healthy at the end of the season, I'm going to go ahead and say no, because I don't think he's 100% healthy now. So if he's not healthy now, there's no way he's going to be healthy after, taking some abuse on the football field. The other thing too is the injury concerns for me are the top end portion. I mean, we're talking about having some sort of, degenerative nerve damage in that knee. So it's something that really doesn't heal. It doesn't get better. And so as a result, I don't know what I can expect. I think we've seen that there's some burst issues there. He doesn't have the burst that he had once to be able to carry that load. So I can understand the idea with saying, well, if he gets the same carries, he could end up in that 15 to 21 range. I'm not going to have him on any of my teams. And I just think that there's just entirely too many variables that everything has to line up for it to work out for him.
Well, so I guess the other part of the question is, if you're a believer, let's say you're a believer in the health and that he can pull out another really good year, is the ceiling in this offense with his talent there that if it works out, that you could maybe be getting a steal as your RB2? You
Absolutely.
Think there, yeah?
No. If he's healthy, yeah, the talent's there and he's got everything going on for him. Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move to a position with a lot less question marks for the Falcons. We're going to go to the wideouts here. Julio Jones, one of the most consistently elite, receivers in the game for many years now. No change last year. The number 3 wide receiver, caught just under 100 balls, just under 1,400 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which has been, kind of an average year for Julio. He's not one of those touchdown machine kind of a guys. It's been volume and yardage, which is okay because I'd rather know I'm going to get 100 catches plus and 1,400 yards and give or take 3 or 4 touchdowns than, 500-yard swings and 30, 40 receptions.
Sure.
So, Julio Jones to me is definitely in the conversation as the number 1 wide receiver to be picked. I'm a little bit down on Hopkins. I still love him, just a little bit down on him for reasons. Same thing with Michael Thomas. So he's that guy that might slide into my number 1 wide receiver this year, but he'll still be in the back half of the first round for me. Is there any reason to think Julio Jones is not, a penciled in top 3, top 5 wide receiver?
No, I mean, the only way would be if he can't stay on the field. I mean, the guy's reliable when he's on the field. He's got great hands. The guy does everything you want. I mean, he's a future Hall of Famer. Yeah, I mean, fantasy-wise, if he's there or you've pegged that guy, you want to take him in the first round, you really can't go wrong. And you hit on it. The only downside is you don't know if you're getting 3 touchdowns or you're getting 9 touchdowns. Some years they just don't get him the football to score touchdowns, but the other points are going to be there. The reception points, the yardage points, you're going to get those.
Yeah. And, I guess the bigger question is a lot of people are seeming like they feel Calvin Ridley is ready to take that next step, whether it's because of just the volume that's available in that offense, or the talent that he has. He was the number 25 receiver last year with 93 targets, caught 63 balls for 866 and 7 touchdowns. So I guess my question is, when they talk about a big step up, I don't see the room for this big step. I'm not saying he can't be better, but what does that mean? Do you think he can be a little better, or do you see a pathway to him becoming a top 15, kind of a guy?
Well, I assume that the people that are talking about that are saying, well, you had Mo Sanu for some of the season last year. You had Austin Hooper, who got a good amount of catches. You had Devontae Freeman, who got a good amount of targets out of the backfield. All these guys being gone now, they say, oh, okay, well, immediately that path leads to Calvin Ridley getting those touches and putting up, big numbers. I don't think it's there either. I don't see him taking a big step forward. I think he has some issues with some drops, especially in possession type situations. Pardon me. So that to me doesn't scream a big, huge breakout over what he had last year with, what'd you say, 63 and 160 or 868. So I don't see that happening. I think that might kind of be the guy he is. Between 55 and 70 receptions, between 750 and 950 yards, in between 5 and 9 touchdowns might be who you have at your number 2.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just that, if I'm looking at my roster construction, I'm thinking, do I feel okay with Calvin Ridley as my number 2 wide receiver? And overall, I don't think that I do. Unless maybe I'm an extraordinarily running back heavy team. I went, 3 RBs off the board for whatever reason first, and then I started filling in receivers after that. And then we're talking about a 5th or a 6th round wide receiver 2. But overall, just the feeling that he might be the second best wide receiver on my team doesn't give me the good feels.
Agreed. Me neither. It wouldn't do it for me either. And there's, again, it's just too many variables with him. And you're throwing in another guy that they went out and got, that's in the tight end room. So we're talking about a lot of different things going on here. Obviously, they're going to want to use Todd Gurley, but if he goes down, it goes running back by committee. I mean, you're talking about Brian Hill and Ito Smith and Quadri Olison. All these guys would be seeing the field. I don't see it. I wasn't a big fan of his being drafted in the first round. I mean, I watched him when he was at Alabama. A lot of the catches he made were because he beat somebody over the top and the ball was put right on the money. He's not going to drop those. Totally agree 100%. But he gets involved in possession situations and he gets some alligator arms and he doesn't make the catches. So, and the hands get a little bit harder. So you watch a guy like Julio Jones. It doesn't matter if he's possession, he's over the top, he's beats his guy. It doesn't matter. I mean, you could drape yourself all over him. He's going to make the catch. Calvin Ridley's not that guy to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, nice piece. Happy to have him, but don't see the step up happening for him. Right now in this offense, I think he's doing fine. He's performing with what he's got, and another 100 targets is probably in the books for him. So,
right,
about where you get him, right?
That's right.
About that tight end position really quickly, because as you mentioned, Hooper's gone. 97 targets, quite a lot of targets to be gone there. And he only played 13 games. So the reality is, overall, that could have been 110 plus targets for him. And so they bring in Hayden Hurst to replace him. Hurst went in the first round a number of years ago, hasn't really fulfilled that potential, has had some little flashes. So I guess the question is, for me, I felt like the tight end position was utilized more when the offense wasn't working well. And then when they were playing well towards the end of the year, they weren't using it as much. Now you have Hayden Hurst. If you're going to tell me he's going to get 75 plus targets in a Matt Ryan offense, that puts him into that back end tight end 1 conversation for me. Do you think he's going to pull 70 plus targets?
I don't think he's going to. I look at it. I know they went out and got him. I feel like it was a situation where Baltimore was in a situation where they felt like maybe he wasn't living up to what they were looking for. And they found a suitor in Atlanta who was basically, needed to fill that spot. So it all made sense. But I don't see him as an elite tight end. I don't think he'll find his way into that level. And I think that he's going to have a hard time getting on the same page with Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan's a very good quarterback. He throws with really good anticipation. He does everything that you want out of a quarterback. One area that he's starting to lack in because he is getting a little bit older is that arm strength, pushing the ball deep down the field. And the reason that Hayden Hurst made his name to get into this league was because of his 40 time at the tight end position. So he could find himself maybe outrunning some of the passes that Matt Ryan is looking to throw that he would have thrown to Austin Hooper. Just all lines up as a problem to me. I know that they'll figure it out over time, but I can't take him, especially early part of the season, probably through at least 6 weeks, to make it into that conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's going to be a wait and see kind of a thing because if, Hurst can't pull a decent amount of targets, that might be the pathway for Ridley, to get the targets to move up. But it could also just mean Russell Gage or somebody we haven't talked about yet, could become relevant, as that third wide receiver.
Sure.
Depends what the offense looks like when they get rolling. But, I think one thing's for sure, there's going to be points scored for Atlanta Falcons this year. There always are. And fantasy players are going to want to have some Falcons. So.
Well, they went out and got Laquan Treadwell to add to that mix. You also have Brandon Powell. I mean, it looks like the Atlanta Falcons are going with the whatever SEC receiver I can find to put into the situation. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be options there. I just have a feeling he may be that guy who's on the outside looking in.
Yeah. All right, let's keep moving further south to the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers. That
All
works.
right.
I love that one. That was a good one. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously Tampa Bay, probably the biggest storyline. I mean, Tom Brady, for whatever it's worth, which probably not to him. I don't feel like he's like one of those attention-seeking kind of, athletes or celebrities.
Sure.
But with the lack of sports being played, I mean, how many hours have been dedicated to talking about Tom Brady? If The Last Dance didn't come out, the Jordan thing, it would literally be like 6 hours of Tom Brady talk a day,
right,
on ESPN. Now, thankfully, we have the Jordan, stuff, all kinds of stuff to talk about with that. But Brady, did it again. He made the whole offseason about him somehow, even after making the decision. And it's still probably the biggest storyline going on in football, 2.5 months later.
Sure. It's massive. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it is a big story for fantasy because say what you will about, Jameis Winston and if he made Tampa Bay a better team or not, but 5,000 yards and 33 touchdowns helps your damn fantasy team. You know that. And number 3 on the year, I know that the talk is about the turnovers, 30 interceptions. That's a big old beast of a number. But us fantasy players know that all that means is catch-up points. You're in the second half, you're down by touchdowns, and you were throwing the ball all over the damn place. And that's exactly what Jameis Winston did all year last year. I mean,
right.
He was a beast for those second half points. And so now they have Tom Brady. And I think a lot of people will say that, yes, Tampa Bay was 7-9, and it's very, very possible they will be a better team with more wins with Tom Brady. The question becomes, where is the value for these other guys, comparative to last year, going into this year? So let's start with Brady. He was the number 12 quarterback. Winston was number 3. About 1,000 yards separated them. About 9 or 10 touchdowns. Combined, maybe about 7, 8 touchdowns separated them. Winston having more. And then we know, 22 more interceptions. Those are negative 2 points in fantasy football, but a lot of interceptions to equal, a handful of touchdowns, right? So, you got the yardage there. Where's Tom Brady going to be this year? Is he a QB1? Does he have the ceiling that he used to have with these weapons? Can he be 35-plus touchdowns?
No, I don't think so. I do like the weapons that he has in Tampa Bay. I have a question as to how he's going to mesh together with them year one. So I'm thinking that his numbers are going to be fairly similar to last year. Maybe a little bit of an uptick in the passing touchdowns and a little bit of an uptick in those interception numbers too, by taking a little bit more, a few more chances in places and maybe sometimes trying to fit the ball into one of these playmakers to get something done. So I can see both those numbers, touchdown and interception, going up. Yardage wise, I could see him sticking right in the same area. 4,000, 4,200 yards I could see for him. So, yeah, I think that's probably where he's going to fall, and I think that's probably good for maybe QB 11 to 15.
Yeah, and, it's tough in that area, right? Because you are looking at a lot of other quarterbacks that, just like Tom Brady, do have, some theoretically high ceilings, right? Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, all these guys are, kind of in that range, Matt Ryan as well. And every one of those quarterbacks could be a top 5, quarterback.
Right.
I don't think there's any doubt that they all still could, not, regardless of everything else, age, whatever. But with the teams they're on right now, the ceiling is there for all those guys. It's just, what the expectations are. I'm not going to want to have Tom Brady on my team because I'm going to be too wrapped up in the storylines.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like it's going to be so intense to have him as your quarterback. Every week there's going to be like so many national games and so much coverage and like.
Well, yeah, it's like if you're a sports gambler, you don't ever gamble on your own team because you're already invested. You don't want to be double invested.
Yeah, and you make bad decisions, right?
That's right.
So I think Brady, is very interesting, obviously, for a lot of reasons. Arians' offense, the new weapons, all that good stuff. I just, I'm going to punt further probably. If I punt quarterback, I'll probably punt even further down the line than that.
Okay.
Let's grab a Brady, but we'll see. Let's talk about the backfield here. Brady's backfields for quite a while haven't been extraordinarily impactful in the rushing game, but in the passing game, there's been tons of value there, mostly in the sense of James White. So Peyton Barber's gone. We still have the incumbent Ronald Jones Jr. And we have now Keyshawn Vaughn drafted in the 3rd round out of Vanderbilt. From what I've seen, the scouting report is maybe not one of the top pass catching, running backs that are coming out, but he's good. He's probably better than Ronald Jones catching the ball, and I see a pathway for him. His ADP is already above Ronald Jones. He's already being drafted ahead of Ronald Jones. But when we talked earlier, I think you felt like Ronald Jones would be overall the running back to have here. Now, what that means is up to you. But you think Ronald Jones has a pathway to be the number 1 here. Give me the argument why it's going to be him and not Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yeah, I mean, I can make it as simplistic as you have a guy who's already been in the system. Now, I understand you're bringing in a new quarterback and you bring in a new, some other new faces, but the system is still there. Bruce Arians' system and the offensive coordinator, their system is going to be the same, and they're going to figure out how to use the pieces that they have. And that gives Ronald Jones a leg up on a rookie coming in right away. The other thing is that rookies at this level are by and large unproven. So regardless of who you have getting them the ball out of the backfield, and if he is supposed to be the target out of the backfield, maybe in 3rd down, passing situations and things like that, one thing to pay attention to is every time this guy steps on the field, he's not going to be catching the ball out of the backfield. He's going to be required to stay in and pick up a blitz. And if you can't pick up a blitz at this level with Tom Brady as your quarterback, he's going to eat your friggin' lunch for you. So, I mean, that's why I think Ronald Jones, and I'm not saying Ronald Jones is great at picking up blitzes or anything like that, but I think that he's already got a little bit of a leg up on this younger kid in Keyshawn Vaughn. And so I think he'll be the guy. Not only that, again, let's make no mistake about it. I know Bruce Arians is the coach. Tom Brady walks through the door. There's 2 alpha personalities that are going to, make sure that, hey, it's my way or it's no way. But make no mistake about it. Tom Brady walking through that door is going to dictate how this offense runs. And if somebody's not getting it done, they're going to be out the door.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they already made the investment in the offensive line, drafting with their first pick, Tristan Wirfs. So, obviously protecting Tom Brady is a priority. Getting Gronk out of retirement, one of the better blocking, tight ends, also knows Tom Brady and knows what he likes to do. So you can tell that it's a priority for them to protect him. It totally makes sense at 43 when the season starts.
Sure.
Got to protect the guy, right? So I get that. I think Jones will be I think Keyshawn Vaughn has the higher ceiling and is a more interesting pick, but it seems like his ADP will keep rising throughout the offseason and may even pull into that 3rd, 4th round. And that's too rich for me when you get Jones, a few rounds later and don't have to have him as one of your top 2 or 3 running backs. And you can kind of wait and see what happens. So,
that's really rich, man. I mean, spending that type of pick on a guy that's unproven, and we're not talking about a team where you have, a rookie Christian McCaffrey coming in or a rookie Saquon Barkley. I mean, those are 2 names that just, or Alvin Kamara, where they're coming into a situation where there's other personalities there and other situations that can, make him effective right off the jump. I mean, I feel like he's walking in to a battle. I mean, they brought this kid in because they're looking at Ronald Jones saying, you haven't gotten it done to this point. Well, Ronald Jones is not going to be helping this dude. He's going to be looking at him like, you ain't taking my job.
Yeah.
So I think that dynamic in that room is going to be very difficult for him to just walk in as a rookie and go ahead and take over.
Yeah, I think, hopefully it seems like we might be on a pathway to having a full, preseason training camp, all those things. That can only help Keyshawn Vaughn to get out there, get the reps,
Sure.
Coaches learn the playbook, all that stuff. And I think I'll be much more interested to hear, the coach speak that goes on in this backfield throughout the offseason, to be listening for clues as to who might have a pathway to number 1. Because I do think if somebody winds up as the clear number 1 here, the value could be, tremendous. It could be a league-winning type of a player, if they wind up being the by far, number 1 on the team.
Sure.
Remains to be seen for sure. Let's talk about the wide receivers who were obviously much more productive last year. Both wide receivers in the wide receiver 1 category. Godwin number 2, Mike Evans number 12, but in only 13 games. So both had extraordinary seasons, again, on the back of, playing a lot of come from behind football. They had 2 different pathways here. Mike Evans had a few just absolutely just gross monster games, week winning games, and then had a few week losing games himself, right?
Right.
Donut, I believe, right there in the first part of the season. Chris Godwin was much more consistent, had a few blow up games, but also didn't really have the lows that you got with Mike Evans. So, and I think when you look at what Brady's been doing the last few years with Edelman, to me, it's clear that Chris Godwin is the one that can be a top 5 wide receiver. And I don't see a path to Mike Evans being a top 15 wide receiver unless he has 15 plus touchdowns.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Chris Godwin is just the better all-around receiver. I think he has better hands. I think he's a better route runner. He's sneaky with his speed. He's one of those guys that doesn't look like he's moving as fast as he is.
Yeah.
So I think all around he's just a really, really good receiver. And I think that he's a better option. And I think Tom Brady, that's one of the things. I mean, if you think about it, he's looking for a reliable target. And it's great if you're a home run hitter, and that's fine. But he's only really had one of those in his career, and that was Randy Moss. And let's make no mistake about it, Mike Evans is not Randy Moss. No, so, Chris Godwin, I think at this point in his career is going to be more what he's looking for, because, Chris Godwin can take the top off the defense, but he can play possession. He can do anything you want. So I think he's going to be the number one in this system with Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, see how big Evans is getting. He's closer to freaking Thaddeus Moss than he is to Randy Moss right now.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm a lot lower on Evans than a lot of people are. And frankly, I mean, he won't be on any of my teams because I am a lot lower. But I don't know. I haven't seen anyone out there that has him as low as I do in that bottom end, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 20, 22, 23. But that's what I see. That's what I'm looking at. So if you're a Mike Evans fan, just don't listen to my advice throughout the offseason, because unless his ADP starts dropping like a stone, like cinder block in the Hudson.
Right.
He's not going to be on any of my teams.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I wouldn't want him on any of my teams either. I just don't know how well he's going to sync up with Tom Brady. It'll be interesting to see. I just think that Chris Godwin is going to work a lot better in that situation. And I think that, I'm sure, which we're going to move on to in a minute, I think the tight ends will be better for him as well.
Exactly, yeah. So, as we tie it into the tight ends and finish up the receivers here, you had who was it? Justin Watson, Scotty Miller, both showed a little bit near the end there. When they got a little bit of time. I don't necessarily know that it matters who wins the number 3, but do you think you have someone have the front track here? Do you like someone as the number 3, and will it matter for fantasy?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters at all. I think with the tight end room being what it is, with Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, and Cameron Brate, and then you throw Godwin and Mike Evans, and then you talk about Jones and Vaughn out of the backfield, I don't think it matters. I don't think there's going to be any significant output out of that slot position. I think those guys are guys that you're going to be talking about at the end of the season that maybe have, between 30 and 45 catches for, under 500 yards and maybe 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. I don't think we're going to be talking about any sort of significant impact on the offense. So I don't think it really matters at this point.
If you see any kind of injury to Godwin or Evans, man, make sure you're first on that line to scoop one of these guys up for sure.
You're right.
So let's move on to that crowded tight end room you mentioned. They got Rob Gronkowski to come out of retirement and vacate his WWE title, which I know must have been absolutely heartbreaking for him. I'm concerned he might start throwing some elbows on the field. I'm not sure.
Never know.
Hopefully he got all that wrestling out of his blood there with that one appearance at WrestleMania. I'm a little concerned about people drafting Gronk because I think he's going to be a situational player when they need him. He's not going to be playing 75% plus of the snaps. I don't see that usage for him. So not worrying about ADP or where they're being drafted. Who do you think is the tight end to own on this team, just overall for production?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are not going to agree with me on this. I think it's Cameron Brate. I think Cameron Brate is going to be the most productive out of that group because I think that he can be on the field more than any of them. And I think he has the best hands because Rob Gronkowski is not going to be on the field enough. And we don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. So I think it's Cameron Brate. And I think the way that Cameron Brate plays tight end, I think will match up really well with Tom Brady. So I think that he's the guy to have. OJ Howard has always been an outlier. He's got every possible physical tool, but there's something where that light has not come on. He has not been able to put it together consistently. Obviously, the offensive coaching staff does not feel comfortable with him doing it on a consistent basis, and that's why he hasn't found his way into this offense. So I think Cameron Brate's the guy to own.
Yeah, I can see a really funny statistical anomaly year for Gronkowski where he has 41 receptions, 9 touchdowns.
Oh, right.
330 yards, but gets every other game. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I definitely see it. And to be quite honest, with the way tight end 10 through 20 goes, that's all you need. I mean, you can have 20 touches. If 6 are touchdowns, you're going to be a tight end 12. I mean, Wick, crawled up into the tight end 12 last year. So,
Yeah, it's very true. Cameron Brate, I think, will be the most reliable out of that group.
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for Tampa Bay this year is, will their fans be awake for their primetime games? Because they're used to being the game's over and they're drunk with desperation and pity by about 6 o'clock. So they're not used to 30 start times.
Look at it this way. One of the things I'm interested to see with our particular watering hole that we like to go to watch football on Sundays, I can't wait to hear what that New England room sounds like the first time I show up to that place, because I guarantee you it's going to be a ghost town.
Oh, it'll be a ghost town, and it's going to be. We have to be careful, right? Because I mean, they might get some serious blowback from the other side of the.
Absolutely.
They've been pulling this Patriots chant on us for I don't know how many years, closing off the back room, using up all the big screens.
Right.
And then it's not even like they cheer when they score, right? It's like a 6-yard run and they're all yelling.
Yeah, exactly. Get out of here, man. Yeah. I'm excited I'm excited for the blowback they are going to get by the rest of the bar for the decade of a nonsense we've had to put up from them.
And I got to say, I understand why they didn't do it. And I guess it's already been done, right? The schedule, they knew who they were going to play, but they didn't know, where and the order and all that stuff. Sure. But with Tom Brady having 1 or 2 seasons maybe to play, if you don't get him to play the freaking Patriots, I'm going to blow my, I've been really upset about that.
Now, that'll be like a week 1 game next year. Not this upcoming season, but 2021 season, it'll be like a week 1 game.
Yeah, they got to veto it, even if it's already written, whatever they have to do to make it happen, they just should do that. It's really unfair to do that, right? So
They will. And the most interesting part of that, and what everybody will talk about is Tom Brady and Bill Belichick going to shake hands after the game? Is there, that's going to be the major story from that game. Did they shake hands? Did somebody give the other person a cold shoulder? All that nonsense.
Yeah, all week there's going to be, who knows how many questions you got to answer all week leading up to the game. Going to be little quip, fun answers from both of them. It'll be fun.
Right. So, yeah, that's right.
All right, let's go to a slightly less interesting team right now, Carolina Panthers. But that being said, for a team that may not be very good, there's absolutely fantasy players you need to have on this team. Not just the big one. There's other guys to look at here. So pretty busy offseason for these Carolina Panthers. Lots of new look here. So let's just start at the top. They have a brand new head coach, Matt Rule, came from Baylor, before that Temple. Offensive coordinator Joe Brady from LSU, one of the part of the architects of this great LSU season they just had. So along with the coaching changes, Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, both gone out of the quarterback room. To a lesser extent, Greg Olsen and Chris Hogan. To a much lesser extent, Chris Hogan, both gone and off the team. They brought in Teddy Bridgewater, gave him some money. Didn't Nick Foles him. They didn't handcap themselves by giving him an egregious amount of guaranteed money. But they gave him an opportunity. I'm very happy about that. I think it's time for him to have an opportunity to be a starter. And, we'll give it a year or two and see what happens. They also brought in a bunch of wide receivers. Robbie Anderson, probably the biggest name there, but also Pharaoh Cooper and Seth Roberts, who both had, quietly, productive end of the years last year that were showing some improvement. So there's a lot to break down, a lot to guess about here. There's not too many known factors. So Teddy Bridgewater, in his short time last year, 5-0, had a almost 70% completion percentage, and threw 9 touchdowns against 2 picks. In a Sean, obviously he's got, different coach, playing for New Orleans. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of other factors. But I am pretty optimistic for Teddy Bridgewater overall, even if not necessarily fantasy football this year. So do you feel like they made the right move? Do you think this is a good quarterback for them to sign and go with right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good quarterback for them to go with right now because let's make no mistake about it. This franchise is in rebuild mode. And, sorry to, use this pun, but Teddy Bridgewater is a bridge quarterback right now. I mean, he's there to bridge this gap from right now till when they get that next quarterback, whether it's in this upcoming draft in 2021 or whether it's the year after. That's what he's here for. Go out there, win us some games, put some butts in the seats. Let's put some points up. Let's make it exciting. But I don't think that they have any illusion or any inkling that Teddy Bridgewater and this group are going to take them to the promised land. I don't think it's there.
Okay, so I mean, I see that. You want to obviously have somebody good. You don't want to tank the season, right? You're not going to let Will Greer be the number one and nobody is number two. So right. I'm like, maybe you struck gold, and if you did, I mean, fantastic, obviously. And if you didn't, like you said, there'll be opportunities to get your franchise quarterback moving on. I think Bridgewater's an interesting guy if you're, in a 2-quarterback league or you're in a super flex league, something like that. But really can't be looked at as a serious late round draft candidate at this point, can he?
No, I don't think so. You would really have to take a wait and see approach with him. I wouldn't burn a draft pick on him. Wait to see kind of what it looks like. And you might be able to pick him up off the waiver wire, maybe early if you see some trends that you like. But no, I don't think that you can spend a draft pick and stash Teddy Bridgewater on your bench. I don't think it's a smart idea for your team.
Yeah. I mean, so he's going to be, like you said, wait and see. When we start talking about bye weeks and injuries and streamers, we'll see how he's performing up till then, and he might be somebody we target. But
sure, I mean, let's use the Mike Vick at Philly analogy, right? I mean, nobody knew after that big layoff and what we were going to have. Now, obviously, we've seen Teddy Bridgewater recently, but we didn't know what we were going to get out of Mike Vick. And he had to come in due to injury, and he comes in. And after a couple weeks, you see, oh, wow, this guy's still got something left in the tank. You pick him up off the waiver wire, and it was a season-changing pickup. You might have to do that with Teddy Bridgewater as well.
Well, you're not going to have the luxury of waiting for this guy, Christian McCaffrey, unless you are
right.
A few picks here. So, legendary season last year really was just head and shoulders above the rest of the running back class. And we had some decent seasons, but nothing close to this guy. Almost 1,400 yards on the ground, 15 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards through the air, 116 receptions, another 4 touchdowns. So epic season, no doubt about that. That was 2019. Now it's 2020. We got a new quarterback, completely new coaching staff, and a Christian McCaffrey that's had an absolutely absurd snap count rate for this team. He's been on the field like 95% of the offensive snaps over the last couple of seasons. We can't guarantee that with a new coach, new offensive system, new everything. What we do know is they did not bring in another running back to really compete, obviously, right? So they still have McCaffrey as the clear-cut number one, with Bonifant coming in or maybe somebody else to just give him a little bit of break here. But he seems to be the consensus number one for almost everybody. I feel like there's more question marks about that than people are saying because of the quarterback and the coaching changes. So you probably know a little more about Matt Rule and Joe Brady than I do in the offenses they run. Do they really focus on that running back position? Does he have the ability to touch the ball 400 times again?
Well, yeah, he has the ability to do it. I do think that if, Joe Brady, let's make sure that everybody understands. I mean, Joe Brady was not the offensive coordinator at LSU. He was the passing game coordinator. So he was brought in with that specific view of get Joe Burrow into a position where he distributes the football to your playmakers. I want you to take charge of this passing game, and I want you to take it to the next level. And he did that. In doing so, he used Clyde Edwards-Helaire pretty well out of the backfield as well. So there's no reason to think that his numbers are going to come down as far as passing is concerned and receptions are concerned. Where I would take a look would be for somebody like Mike Davis, a bigger back out of South Carolina, to maybe be that more downhill sort of guy in a Joe Brady offense, to take a little of the pressure off of Christian McCaffrey in early down situations or in late down situations, however they decide to spell him, but to keep him more fresh. And especially, I mean, look at the money they just spent. So look at the money you just spent on Christian McCaffrey. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where, because of the early wear and tear, you just spent this money and it's going to be money wasted. Because if we're talking about a situation where Teddy Bridgewater is the bridge quarterback to the next quarterback, when that guy shows up, you damn well want to have a 100% healthy and effective Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, so, you drew the number 1 pick this year, right? You're going up to your draft, and, every mock draft and every ranking system has McCaffrey number 1. How earnestly are you looking at Barkley, Cook, Elliott? Are these guys that are going to have a legitimate chance to be drafted number 1, or you just got to do your due diligence and look at it, but it's going to be McCaffrey?
No, for me, I'm definitely looking at those guys. I'm looking at every single one of them. I'm looking at the way that their respective situations have changed, what's positive, what's negative. I'm doing the due diligence, and I am not settled on Christian McCaffrey at number 1.
All right, yeah. I mean, I think there's questions. Again, if everything was the same as last year, Ron Rivera, same quarterback situation, I'd be thinking differently. But too many variables when I know that Saquon Barkley has, basically walking into the same exact situation he was in, just trying to get better at it this year. I think they are going to take a step forward in New York this year. So if I'm number 1, which let's all hope I'm not number 1.
Yeah, I hate number 1.
Might be on the Barkley train, but we'll see.
Right.
To wide out quickly here, I know you're big on DJ Moore. Was the number 18 wide receiver last year in 15 games. 87 catches, 135 targets, just under 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns. My concern with DJ Moore is that, while I like him very much, it's hard for me to see him getting more than 135 targets again and then producing that much more with it as Teddy Bridgewater is the quarterback. And so for me, that keeps him in that back end wide receiver 2 tier. He finished at 18 last year. He might be my number 18 wide receiver in my pre-draft rankings, but it will be between 18 and 24. It definitely will not go above that. But you're a fan of DJ Moore. You think he should crack that top 15, top 12?
Yeah, I think he can. I definitely think he can. And a lot of it's going to have to we're going to have to see how well Teddy Bridgewater fits in with what Joe Brady wants to do and how that kind of works itself out. I don't see him getting under 135 targets. And I think those catches will go up because there was a lot last year where I think he just wasn't, if you take a look at the 135 targets and 87 catches, you say, well, I guess, that's okay. That's middle of the road, but we're not taking into account the errant throws because he didn't have the quarterback play.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you look at it, was obviously a small sample, with Bridgewater last year, but 70% completion. You might think that 135 could turn into 100 catches or 105 catches.
Right.
35 targets, and maybe that's 200 yards and 2 more TDs. All that together will move you up 3, 4, 5 spots.
Right.
The season. So yeah, it's definitely there. Again, my concern is only about the passing system they're going to use, the volume of passing that this offense is going to show. I just have a feeling that it's not going to get to the level where anybody can really, bust out into that, number 1 category for, receiver here.
Well, there was a reason they went and signed Teddy Bridgewater, right? I mean, obviously they weren't comfortable with the quarterbacks they had on the roster. Totally understand that.
Yeah.
But I think the other reason that you go and sign a guy like that is because you look at it and you say, okay, I'm in rebuild mode. I need to bridge this gap to get to the next, franchise guy that I have. I need to bring in somebody, though, who is good enough to protect my franchise asset I have on the roster right now, which is Christian McCaffrey. What does that mean? Well, that means I got to put the ball in the air more. I've got to get it. I've got to push it into intermediate and deep range throws in some situations. And that means I think DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson could even have really nice numbers.
Yeah, no, you're right. But you got to get out of having 7, 8 guys in the box. That's a quick way to get you running back, run
there
over.
You go.
So let's talk about the other guys here outside of DJ Moore. Curtis Samuel was the number 36 wide receiver last year. They brought in Robbie Anderson, probably the biggest name, well, definitely the biggest name of the 3 guys that they brought in here. So there's a lot of rumors about Curtis Samuel leaving. Let's look at it 2 different ways. Let's say Samuel stays. Does then take too much value away from Anderson that either one is viable? If they're both there, can you draft either one of them?
No, I don't think he'll take too much away from Robbie Anderson. I think if Curtis Samuel was still on the roster, you'd be looking at him taking stuff away from somebody like Pharoh Cooper, maybe farther into that wide receiver room and that wide receiver fantasy depth. But I don't think he would take too much away from Robbie Anderson. Look, I think you brought in Robbie Anderson for, the fact that he's a veteran. He's a take the top off the defense sort of guy, and you can bring him in and feel pretty comfortable about him being a home run hitter for you when you need it, when you're looking for it. So I don't think Curtis Samuel eats too much into that. But if you're talking about looking for a guy in that range, in that 36 to 52 range, he's going to eat into what those guys would get, like Pharoh Cooper and some of the other players on that team.
So, yeah, Robbie Anderson right now is definitely, still a value with Curtis Samuel still on the team. He's going in the 10th, 11th round right now. And as a guy that had 96 targets last year, coming in, that could be the number 2 here. I don't see any reason not to draft Robbie Anderson in the 10th round if he's there.
I don't either. And if the way that we're looking at it with Joe Brady is in fact the way it works out, that ball's going to be going in the air a lot. And if it's going in the air a lot, that gives Robbie Anderson even that much more opportunity to make a big play.
So, overall, it sounds like, Carolina could be a sneaky team to have some assets on, depending on how you play your cards in the draft here. Could be a lot of value. Not a lot of people be drafted high outside of McNaughton.
Yeah, and I think that one reason they're an interesting team, we talked about this when we did the AFC North and we talked about the Bengals, right? And one of the things was we said, look, this team is still rebuilding. Even though they got what they think is their franchise quarterback, they're still rebuilding. They have some pieces, but they're going to be playing some games from behind. And if you're okay in fantasy with waiting to get some of those garbage time touchdowns and points and trying to come back on people, you can go ahead and take these players. I think once you get outside of Christian McCaffrey, you might be looking at that same thing with Carolina. They're in a tough division. They're going to be playing against some tougher teams. And you might have to, if you take DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson or some of these other players off this team, you're going to have to be comfortable with looking at your game in the third quarter and going, I still need 20 points out of somebody.
Yeah.
And you might get it. You might get it. Some weeks you won't, some weeks you will. But I think that's what you're going to have to be okay with out of this team.
Yeah, it's weird for me. It's another one of those situations where I feel like the team has made moves to get better. But for fantasy purposes, I'm actually lower on their assets this year than I was last year for a worse team.
Yeah, losing Luke Kuechly on that defense.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be so difficult to replace.
Yeah.
And when you have, normally, in a lot of ways, if you have to replace a guy like that on defense, it manifests itself in different ways for the football team. So if you can't get off the field, you're not turning the other team over, you're not doing those things, it hurts the fantasy value that you're getting on the offensive side of the ball. And that's my fear, right, is that teams are going to be able to score on this group, and they might have some long, they maybe in some ways did get better by some of their pickups, but you might see some of those long drives that keep that defense on the field, and then it makes it that much harder for the offense to get you your fantasy points.
Yeah, and I know they had one draft pick, I think in the top 10, they went with a defensive lineman with Derek Brown out of Alabama, maybe they went with. Trying to remember who they went with, but they went basically all defense in the draft. So at least they right? Not pick up for Luke Kuechly, but at least, they went all defense in the draft. They went basically all offense in free agency.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Derek Brown's an animal. Yetur Gross-Matos is a very good defensive end, and he's good at getting after the quarterback, but we're still talking about 2 rookies, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to take them a little bit of time to find their way at this level. Yetur Gross-Matos to me is a little bit, even for me, still a little undersized as a rush edge at 260 pounds.
Yeah.
So, running up against those big boy tackles, going to be a bit of an adjustment for him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're just about to wrap it up here, but I do want to talk about the tight end position here for Carolina because Greg Olsen's gone. He's been hanging out for a long time. He's gone now. And no matter what you say about the injury, concern, which is very real with Greg Olsen, when he's on the field, he produces. Only played 10 games last year, but was the number 13 tight end in 10 games. with 52 receptions, almost 600 yards, and only 2 touchdowns. So that's all it takes to get to wide receiver 13, on the season.
Sure.
And is there a pathway for Ian Thomas to be a draftable, tight end? Or will he just not pick up enough of the Olsen targets to get there?
Yeah, there's a pathway for him to do it. I'm just not sure with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, if Curtis Samuels does stay on the roster. I just don't know that there's enough there. And it's going to be tough. I know I said earlier, we were talking about it earlier, we might see a little bit of a tight end renaissance where it makes it a little bit easier to take some of these guys. With Ian Thomas, though, I'm just not sure. I don't know what I could expect out of him to maybe say he's going to be one of those guys that the team's going to feel comfortable with. And looking at Joe Brady again, he didn't use his tight end in Thaddeus Moss all that much last year. He preferred, and I understand we're talking about different team, different makeup, but he preferred to use his wide receivers to get into the seams and get to the outside. Didn't really use the tight ends even to just kind of sit down in zone. So sometimes he used Thaddeus Moss, but it was kind of few and far between. So I have a hard time thinking that Ian Thomas is going to be one of those guys you really need to pick up.
Yeah, he's not on my radar. I mean, I'm looking at, Teddy Bridgewater, who didn't really do much with the tight end position in the games that he did play last year. Cook didn't really do much when he was in there.
Right.
And Ian Thomas is anywhere near as good as Greg Olsen is, frankly.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to be off of them and, frankly, probably off of most of the Panthers this year. But there's a lot to watch for with them. And, we'll see if Matt Rule can turn them around in the next couple of years and make a contender at it.
Well, if you're Matt Rule, getting back to kind of a football perspective here, if you're Matt Rule, you're in a great situation. And as far as a first-year NFL head coach, and the reason I say that is they know they don't have their franchise quarterback. They know they're just coming off of having what they considered to be a franchise quarterback for a long time until he wore down. So you're not in a win-now situation coming in. There's not a lot of pressure on you to win right away. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't surprise me if that team was looking at being up toward the top part of the draft to try to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or somebody like that next year. I'm not saying they're tanking. I'm just saying with the way that they've set up, they may be saying, we're a 5-win team if things fall right. You know?
You don't have to tank to get the number one. You just got to be willing to put out the capital, right? If you're willing to put forth a couple picks, then you can get it if you want it for the most part. Very few teams don't have their quarterback situation either expected to be figured out or hoping they have it figured out with someone on their team right now. Right. So many people looking for a franchise QB right now. So we'll see with that, man. But that does it for the NFC South, man. We got all the way through it, man. I appreciate it. Hope you had some fun.
I did, as always.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, that's going to do it for us. I appreciate your time again. We'll see you soon, everybody. Hopefully we'll get to see Mike soon. And we'll talk to you later, man. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, later, buddy. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Thanks again to Mike McNaughton for coming on, spending some time with us, helping us go through the NFC South. All right. That only leaves one left, right? We got the NFC East. Going to be our last division here before we move on from this series of episodes into some new and fun stuff. I don't want to give away too much, but we're working on a few things. We've got hopefully a nice big mock draft in the works. I've got a number of other kind of off-season and pre-draft strategy episodes planned here. So, keep a lookout for the videos on our YouTube channel. Of course, the GOAT Fantasy Football Podcast. Also, please get in touch with us at Twitter. Go ahead and hit us up at GOATFF Podcast, or you can tweet me at Jim Neander. But go ahead and let us know if you have any questions. You want to tell us how great the show is, how terrible it is, whatever you got. You have questions about your team, your dynasty players, your keepers, whatever it is. I'm here to help. If I can help you win a championship this year, that's what I'm here for. All right, well, until next time, y'all take it easy. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again. Have a good one.